All right, and we back on the forecast. Now, recently in my city, in Richmond, Virginia, there has been a heated discussion going on about whether the monuments and the statues should be removed.
Monument Avenue is one of Richmond's most beautiful streets. Along with Jackson Ward, is one of only two National Historic Landmark districts in the city. But my fellow Richmonders, something is wrong with this picture. It's the story told by the Confederate monuments that give the street its famous name and have defined its landscape for more than a century. It was written in stone and bronze more than 100 years ago, not only to distort history by lionizing the architects and defenders of slavery, but also to perpetuate the tyranny and terror of Jim Crow and usher in a new era of white supremacy. These inanimate objects were designed to do what the Confederate generals and the racist ideologues they depict could not: keep the free African people in Virginia in bondage. In fact, it was nostalgia masquerading as history. Part of the false narrative, the alternative facts, if you will, that we will begin to fact check starting today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our time. It's our responsibility to set the record straight today. It is my belief that without telling the whole story, these monuments constitute a default endorsement of a shameful period in our nation and in our city. And that is why I'm pleased to announce the creation of the Monument Avenue Commission. The job of this commission will be to solicit input, public input, and make recommendations to the mayor's office on how to best tell the real story of these monuments. I have also asked the commission to look into and solicit public opinion on changing the face of Monument Avenue by adding new monuments that would reflect a broader, more inclusive story of our city. That is our goal. I know there's pain in the history of our city.
Now, to me, the ironic part about all of this is, what do they say about Black history? Just forget about it. It's in the past. It's over. Can't we start from right now? Start from scratch. But they have no problem teaching you all about their history. And if you dare say, well, these people were kind of evil people, and we should have their statues removed because, they own other human beings, raped a bunch of women, they killed a bunch of black people. They say, no, we can't tear these statues down. Now, even though these statues are people like Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, Jefferson Davis, of Jeb Stuart, there's a statue of a guy named Matthew Murray who was intended to be erected in D.C., but after so many people objected to it, they just said, well, let's just bring this down to Richmond, Virginia. Now, despite these people's shaky reputation, they feel the need that it's very important to keep their statues up so they can remember their history. See, they understand how important history is and why you need to teach it. And at the same time, how important it is for us to forget our history, which just goes to show you that all of this stuff is very intellectually dishonest, and they're doing it on purpose to keep you in the position that you're in. Now, you often hear people say, well, so many white people died to get black people freedom. White people are the ones who got black people freedom, which is a complete lie. You hear the people who defend keeping these statues up say, well, it wasn't about slavery, it was about states' rights. And you hear the people who were for the Union say, it was about freeing the slaves. When in all actuality, the shit was about money. The war didn't even start over freeing slaves. The South was making a lot of money off of cotton, tobacco, and the North wanted in on that. But the Southern states said, well, no, you're not going to keep taxing the fuck out of us now. And after the South was kicking the North's ass, what did Abraham Lincoln decide to do? He decided to use a tactic that George Washington, his predecessor, had used, and said, Black people, if you come fight on my side, I will give you freedom. We will grant you the Emancipation Proclamation. He even said he didn't want to do it, but it was necessary in order to win the war and keep the Union together. And of course, every time America goes to war, they start becoming nice to black people, and then black people go help them in this war, and then they win the war and go back on what they promised them. Now, in Abraham Lincoln's case, and I guess that's why they call him Honest Abe, he actually did go through with the Emancipation Proclamation, but it didn't necessarily give freedom to slaves because it has the word "except" in there, meaning slavery is legal if what's supposed to be a jury of your peers, which an all-white jury is not my peers, says you are guilty, then you are now a slave. So it did not end slavery. And Abraham Lincoln said himself, well, that doesn't mean black people aren't inferior to white people, meaning the Dred Scott case is not overturned yet. But the war was never originally to free black people. It was to get in on the money that the South was making off of slavery. But the bizarre thing about the Civil War is I've never seen anybody lose a war and still be able to fly their flag. I've never seen the African flag flying at no federal state building. Hell, I've never seen a goddamn British flag flying at a state building. But they fought over taking down Confederate flags at state building, courthouse buildings. They have had to fight about that. Have you ever seen anybody lose a war and still get to fly their flag? Which makes me question who actually won the war. Here in Richmond, Virginia, they have all of these statues and all of this dedication to all of these Confederate soldiers. But they make so many excuses on why we need to keep it. But they make so many excuses on why we need to keep these national historic landmarks, as they would like to call it. And the fact that these monuments are a part of Richmond's $1.7 billion tourism industry, which means people come from all over to see these people who essentially fought a war to keep their taxes low for the money that they made off slaves, off of that free labor. And yeah, recently they have been starting to talk about the history of slavery in Richmond, Virginia. And this is recent. But the oldest monument in Richmond, Virginia is of Robert E. Lee. And it has been here for 127 years. That means in 1890, they put this statue in Virginia. Less than 30 years after the Civil War, they resurrected a statue of General Robert E. Lee. Not to mention all the schools in their name. I didn't know that's how war worked. But the point is, we see these people honor their history, their ancestors, as criminal, as thuggish as their ancestors were. They still understand the point of recognizing their ancestors and paying homage to them and showing remembrance to them. We have to start doing that with our own people, our own history. They recognize how important it is to have the Second Amendment to bear arms, to protect that history that they have. We definitely have to understand and start practicing this part. Regardless if they are a liberal or conservative, Democrat, Republican, on the left or the right, they understand one thing. They all agree on the white dominant society. It doesn't matter about feminists, MGTOW. They agree on the white dominant society. We have to agree on black love, black pride, black protection, black unity in order to defend ourselves. Melanated love, whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, they will put all their issues aside to protect their society, to protect themselves. They control their own narratives. we need to control our own narrative. We need to protect our history, the history that we still have. We need to protect our children. We need to protect ourselves. We need to focus on resurrecting the black family and building our economy and not letting anyone take it, and understanding the power of history. We need to recognize it's not about what anybody says, it's all about what they do. So, I want to hear what you got to say.
And we begin with breaking news from Charlottesville, Virginia, where 2 people have been injured in an altercation with protesters who are out in force over the planned removal of a Confederate statue. Watch this. This ugly scene unfolded just moments ago. From what we understand, clergy members have just arrived at Emancipation Park. That's the site of that protest today, leading groups in prayer. Meantime, militiamen armed with guns also began arriving a short while ago, and you see the result. Police are expecting thousands of people to show up for this demonstration today. The actual event was supposed to start an hour from now, but obviously the tensions in the crowd boiled over. All of this following violent clashes breaking out at a white nationalist march last night at the University of Virginia.
These are the familiar faces of Monument Avenue. There's a movement underway to add another one, Arthur Ashe. Do you think Arthur Ashe's statue should be put on Monument Avenue?
Sure. I think it would be a good idea for the black community to be able to go on Monument and have an historical black man who've done something for the community.
The Ashe statue will stand 24 feet tall. At the base, the tennis legend is surrounded by children. He holds a tennis racket in one hand and books in the other. Former Governor Wilder says the Ashe statue should be put on Monument Avenue, but some Richmonders don't agree.
It's more of a Confederacy type of theme, and we've changed. Richmond's changed a lot.
In fact, some tennis players say an Ashe monument should be near the Bird Park tennis courts.
I think it would be an inspiration to anyone out here playing tennis to know a son of the city's statue would be right here.
Arthur Ashe is perhaps best known for his talents here on the tennis court. But Arthur Ashe, the man, achieved much more than that during his lifetime. Perhaps it's only fitting that a monumental figure should be placed on Monument Avenue.
And Mr. Mayor.
Aye.
Ayes 7, noes none, abstain 1. The paper is adopted.
The healing of a city. That's how Richmond Mayor Leonidas Young is describing City Council's decision to locate the Arthur Ashe statue on Monument Avenue and Roseneath Road.
We hear and feel what you are saying in regards to a definite need for symbolism that finally ends the feud and reconciles Monument Avenue.
A majority of council members appeared set on putting the monument in Bird Park. That was before the 7-hour public hearing. Council members were swayed by the speakers. Many included the late Arthur Ashe's family members who pushed for the Monument Avenue site.
We need to have an avenue of this type that will express our full history and will express our full accomplishments of all people in the city.
City Councilwoman Viola Baskerville told council not to preserve the status quo by keeping Monument Avenue a street dedicated to Civil War heroes. And tradition was broken around 1:15 Tuesday morning when Richmond leaders decided to honor this native son on the city's most famous avenue.
The citizens of my hometown were not letting me down, meaning that they would ensure that it went somewhere that would befit the man.
Richmond's mayor is calling this the city's finest hour. Placing the Ashe statue on Monument Avenue is a step towards healing old wounds. But at least one council member says this former capital of the Confederacy still has a hell of a long way to go.
Mr. Huckabee on Wednesday took his judicial reasoning to a whole new planet. Listen to what he told conservative radio host Michael Medved.
Michael, Dred Scott decision of 1857 still remains to this day the law of the land, which says that black people aren't fully human. Does anybody still follow the Dred Scott Supreme Court decision?
Now, that notorious decision, again from high school history class, affirmed in the simplest terms that slaves were property. Governor Huckabee was equating the marriage decision to that and suggesting because we don't abide by the Dred Scott decision made by the court, the same should apply to the marriage ruling. Keeping them honest, though, when it comes to Dred Scott, let's be charitable and say it doesn't really work like that. It is not still on the books. Two reasons. The first, available for viewing this week, in fact, on PBS.
From director Ken Burns, for the first time in high definition, the Civil War.
That's right, the Civil War. And a direct consequence of the Civil War was a pair of amendments to the Constitution, the 13th in 1865, which abolished slavery, and in 1868, the 14th, which, among many other things, overturned the basis for the Dred Scott decision, no matter what people believed about slavery in the years that followed, and no matter what Mike Huckabee believes now about marriage. Joining us now to elaborate is CNN senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. I mean, do you believe Mike Huckabee actually believes this? What do you make of this?
Well, I don't know. You know, it's Friday night, and my experience is most people on Friday night want to talk about 19th century constitutional history. And so, you know, it's just really a good time to talk about
no
this.
doubt.
And you know, what he actually believes and what he said, I mean, I think he does believe this. There's a whole school of thought that says, you know, that God's law and nature's law can supersede the Constitution. A lot of people believe that, but that is not the law of the United States. It's not what the Supreme Court has said. It's not how the Constitution is written. But, you know, I think he's being sincere. He's just wrong.
But it's interesting because the same people who are arguing that would have a problem with Sharia, and people who believe in Sharia believe that the law of Sharia should supersede the law of any given land.
That's right. And you know, the Constitution is clear, and the way the court has interpreted the Constitution, you know, there are a lot of murky areas, but this happens not to be one of them. You know, the Dred Scott decision was overruled by the 13th and 14th Amendment. Everybody knew that. That was the purpose of the 13th and 14th Amendment. So the idea that Dred Scott is still on the books is, as you said, factually inaccurate.
Just turn around, put your hands behind
For what? Hey, nope. Hey, this man, hey, look, this man, look, hey, look, this man trying to arrest me. It's on camera.
It's the cell phone video sparking a debate. Did a deputy racially profile a lawn guy?
Or did the young man get arrested for not cooperating? The Harris County Precinct 1 constable stands by his deputies, but the man they arrested is planning to file a lawsuit.
Larry Siewert is live downtown tonight with the story. Larry?
Lynn, more than that lawsuit, the man arrested, he filed an internal affairs complaint here today. Meanwhile, Constable Alan Rosen wants to be transparent, offering to share body cam, dash cam videos, even bring in the Texas Rangers to investigate use of force some deem excessive.
Oh, you were going from door to door to
Yeah,
door.
I'm putting my business cards out.
No one disputes the clash between 19-year-old Marlon Gibson.
Let me see your ID.
I don't have it on me.
And one of Constable Alan Rosen's deputies with Harris County Precinct 1 ended with a police dog chewing Gibson's arm.
K9 caused this, but I mean, I don't know what was this for.
But there's plenty of debate.
All he had to do was give his name and date of birth.
Over why it happened. This video posted on Facebook has thousands of views and comments, and the guy who posted it, lawyer Lee Merritt, may sue.
That's a clear violation of the Constitution in terms of excessive force. It also shows that this officer was out of control.
Marin's three clients, Gibson, his brother Marcus, and friend Devontae Williams, run their own summer lawn care business in Houston's Willow Springs subdivision, where they see Deputy Shane Cates patrolling the neighborhood.
I knew it was a problem when he turned around.
Last Tuesday, they say Cates noticed them putting business cards indoors, interrupted their work, demanded to see Gibson's ID, then implied they were involved in break-ins. Marcus even claims other deputies pointed tasers and yelled racial slurs at him.
And he pushed me off the lawnmower, and I asked him what was going on. And he basically just said, shut up.
The community I know needs to hear the other side.
Constable Alan Rosen showed us the 5 deputies involved to prove race was no issue. He also says his deputies saw Gibson going door to door, a tactic used by burglars. Their suspicion only grew when Gibson had no ID and gave them the wrong birthday.
What I have seen thus far from Mr. Gibson is falsities, untruths. He has not been truthful about anything.
Rosen says deputies had no choice but to break down a door, then use their canine and taser to arrest Gibson when he wouldn't cooperate. Rosen then offered to bring in Texas Rangers to investigate. Gibson wants more. Gibson, his two business partners, and their lawyer all want each deputy involved fired. They also want voters to vote Alan Rosen out of his constable seat.